You boys have been busy this week. Lots of signing news coming up. Some for this season, potentially, or are we all next season with what's going on?
At the moment, I think all these are for next year. I wouldn't. Obviously, August 7's approaching for the mid-year transfer swap. The cutoff for that, so we may see one or two. I don't think we're going to see any, big name players shift at the back end of the year. But there's no doubt that there's been a bit of movement. Canterbury continue to sign blokes. Blake Taff locked in. Siwa Takiaho will be there next year. Jamin Salmon will be there next year, and Connor Watson's in talks with them as well. So interesting signings when you've got three players in Watson, Taff, and Salmon who are all utilities. They can play a variety of positions. Different positions are their strengths.
Yeah.
But you'd assume that one of them would be that 14 role for them off the bench, whether the others can force their way into the starting side. What it does do for Canterbury, it gives them some much needed boost around their depth. It increases their squad quality, but whether it's enough to move the needle and push them into the top 8 spot, I'm not sure.
I think there's a common denominator with all of them, Mick, and that is they all come from clubs that win.
They've been preaching that, right?
If you speak to Cam Serraldo, one of the things he's talked about, and one of the things he said in press conferences is they've lacked a winning culture, and that's something they need guys in there who want to win every day, in every rep, in everything they do.
Yeah.
And those guys come from Penrith, the Roosters, and South Sydney clubs who know how to win, and clubs who are used to winning and expect to win. So I think that's, these guys aren't going to, like you said, they're more depth squad members rather than guys who are going to push them. They'll push them up the ladder, but they're not going to win you a comp, right? They're not the guys who necessarily push you over the edge in terms of winning a comp.
They can contribute.
Yeah, but what they will do is they'll change the culture of the place, and that's, I think, Cameron's priority at the moment is changing the culture there, because it's pretty clear from what we've read recently and what we've seen on the field, he's not happy with the culture and not happy with the attitude in that place.
Yeah. It's interesting, though, isn't it, when you look at the positions. You're talking about coming from winning clubs, that's one thing, but the positions that they fill, utility guys, potential halves or fullbacks, and does that not address the issues in that roster? I mean, Takiaho being the exception is the middle, which they are desperately needing, but, what is he, 32 at the moment, Siwa? Is that the...
31, 32.
Yeah.
I would say there's another thing in this. They're all not expensive. At the moment, they need to keep money up their sleeve, because we've all heard they're going to have a red-hot go at Jerome Luai. They're going to have a red-hot go at Payne Haas. So they can't afford to be frittering their money away on players at the moment when those guys go, in 12 months' time, those guys are up for grabs.
Takiaho's on a big deal. Takiaho's on about $500,000, but you're right. The rest of them are around, that 250, 300 mark, and they are first graders, right? They're signing first graders. They are depth signings. They provide a bit of cover. Black Taff provides a bit of cover for Stephen Crichton. Whether you believe Stephen Crichton can play week in, week out fullback, or is his best position in the centres. So that gives you a bit more flexibility there. Connor Watson's a really good player, unlucky with injuries, right? And he takes a bit of pressure off Reid Marnie, there's not really a backup hooker in the club. Kyle Flanagan's been playing that role, but he'll be moved on at the end of the season. And Jamin Salmon has done a job, mainly as an edge back rower, but can play in the halves and centre.
My concern with something you just said there, Mick, was they've got that flexibility to, if Stephen Crichton's not the week in, week out fullback, does that ever work for any team? If you don't have a set 1, 6, 7, 9, which of the teams are set that can actually perform at that level? You've seen teams like the Dragons and the Tigers that flutter around with those
The best
positions.
example is Newcastle, right? When they moved Kalen from 6, you knew that if you got to 2 months into the season or 3 months into the season, because he had that layoff, and Kalen Ponga was back at 1, Newcastle were going to be in a poor state. Yeah. And it'll be the same at Canterbury next year. If they get to 2 months into the year and Stephen Crichton's moved from fullback to centre, well, they're not travelling well. So ideally, Stephen Crichton starts at fullback and goes well. But we've seen... Also, we saw at Origin how he's an elite centre too. Yeah. And they lose in at least one of their centres in Avarello. Alamotti, we're not sure where he ends up. So there is Bronson Sherry's obviously come in there, but there is that vacancy there that maybe they start the year with Crichton in the centres if they feel like Sherry's not ready yet after that long break layoff, and Taff starts at 1. So I don't mind any of these signings at all from Canterbury. I think it makes the squad much better.
Yeah. Well,
They still need some real class in there, though.
They do.
They've obviously made some significant signings in the Kickouts and the Burtons and the Marnies of the world, but that squad really lacks at the high end, lacks high-end depth rather than, these guys, I wouldn't say they're high-end depth. They're good players, as you said, Mick, and they're better than the guys they've got.
Yeah.
And they can help you become a more consistent team, but they lack quality at the high end for me.
Look, I don't want to jump to podcast questions yet.
hold on.
But we do have one which...
Isn't this your show, Mobsy? You see?
But we do have one from...
He had 1 week in the
Bulldogs.
chair and he wants to take over.
Yeah,
This is
I
what
know.
it's like,
This
mate.
fits in, right? Mac Bulldog wants to know, will the Bulldogs be a top 8 threat with a fit full squad next year?
no. Not currently.
Oh, he put a line through him.
I have.
Okay.
I don't think they make the 8 next year.
No.
Okay.
I didn't think they'd make the 8 this year, and I thought if they finished 12th, I thought this year would be a good year and potentially top 8 next year. But now, having watched what I've seen this year, I think they'll be around 11th.
Should I
10th.
put a line through that question then now as well on my sheet of paper, or will you
No, I
ask
just-
it again later?
I won't ask it. But if I ask it, you'll forget.
Oh, hold on,
Are they going to be a top 8
It's
side?
Mobsy's show. Sorry.
Are they going to be a top
Mobsy
8
this.
side next year?
No, not at the moment. There's still time. They can still make a few signings.
Well, this is it. That opinion may change if they address
as it
their
stands
go forward.
right
and-
now.
They're a long way
They
off
can
at
do.
the moment.
Yeah.
A long way off it.
Yeah.